So you're a project management student, if I've got that right. So this would be a different one, I'd imagine, from typical projects that you guys would ever be involved with. Rodney very nicely called me a project manager, but I'm not a project manager by trade, which you guys will all be in the future. I guess, a program coordinator, I would have called myself, pulling together the different strings of the project. So, as Rodney's already described, incredibly complex compared to a standard project. It's not what do we want, what's it going to look like, how much will it cost, rightio, issue a tender, build it, make sure it's going according to the designs and sign it off. Lots of people involved, lots of different visions, all on a similar track, but all needing to come together. So Rodney was very good early in the project. I was relatively naive, maybe, about what needed to be done, and Rodney was busy pushing along behind in the background, and others, saying actually we're going to need some agreements up front with this one. So in terms of from a project management point of view, there was a few agreements that had to get sorted off. There was an MOU between all the parties that Rodney described, just a very simple thing, but it just says we're all working on this thing, we're all going in this direction together, and it was a bit of a sounding board if things didn't go so well. We could come back to the MOU and said, hey, we're working together on this. And then they also pushed hard to make sure that the two parties with the biggest stake in terms of building and running it in the future in the university and the city understood how we were going to work together on the project. So we called that a collaboration agreement. That took a lot of time to get over the line. In terms of
years.
Yeah. In terms of your leader, and Rodney was talking, we've been working on this, it's coming up 8 years in September. The first 3/4 of that was just getting agreement on how we're working together, working out what the thing was going to look like in fundraising. So a lot of projects, I imagine you'll end up working, if you're in the private sector, it's very easy, there's no fundraising. You're not working with multiple parties, you're not having to tie all these different understandings together. So this one was a bit different and quite complex in that sense, and with a bunch of us had never done anything like it before, so working on those agreements take a lot of time. And with big organisations, for example, the university and the city particularly, a lot of decision makers to get through. So it's all very well to say we want to work together and it should be relatively simple, but I can't sign off an MOU or a collaboration agreement. It's got to go through my boss, then my divisional manager, then the CEO, and then it goes to the council. So just on our side, you had 20-something people involved, and then even within my, when I said it goes to my boss, before I can even go to my boss, I've got several different divisions of the council to go through, the accountants and so on. And similarly for the university, they risk managers and others need to look at what that might mean for your jobs if you're ever working on a complex project in the future. A lot of time. Don't get out your Gantt chart and think, yeah, we'll get that done in 2 months, because you'll be 6 months behind and trying to explain why before you even get started. So that will be one learning, is that the things take 2 to 3 times as long as you think they will, and that's if you think you know how long they'll take in the first place. So a lot of time up front like that. The other big learning for me during the project in particularly was the fundraising stage. We learnt a couple of lessons the hard way. Because we were raising so much money from outside the standard council pot, again we didn't allow enough time, and we didn't understand earlier on how tricky it would be to convince some of the parties that we wanted them to fundraise, to support the project, I should say. So again, a lot of time there. So in the end, the City Council's funded about 1/3 of the project, the Central Energy Trust has funded about 1/3, and 1/3 has come from other sources. But there's a big lead-in for a lot of those fundraising sources. A lotteries application, we went through 2 rounds of lotteries. They only meet once every 6 months, and then their decision can be 3 to 6 months after that. So for us, it took 18 months just to get the lotteries money, which was just under $1 million. So in terms of a project timeline, there's 18 months out of our 7.5 years. So yeah, a lot of learnings in the time frames. There was also, as you'll see as we walk through, presumably a little bit afterwards, you can get a little bit of a tour. It's a bespoke project. No one had built one like it before, as Rodney mentioned. that came with some bespoke problems, and all the solutions were bespoke. So every time you ran into a little problem in terms of the contingencies in your timeframes, and because the decision making was complex, it wasn't a case of Aaron decides whether or not it's okay for the extra poles that were required in the walk-through aviary to go ahead. He had to go through various decision making bodies, including a project steering group, and then potentially off to council and things. Something like we need some extra poles in the middle because we didn't quite get some earthworks and designing on the other side right up front. It took 2 months. And you've got a community who's saying you've started building it, you're getting nowhere, what's going on? So your communication and your learnings around communicating with people and allowing for things to go wrong on a bespoke project are important. That'll be really hard for you guys when you're out there dealing with something like this that's complex and unusual, because your clients will all be saying, just get it done, what's the problem? Don't allow, I need to have it built in 12 months, don't allow 2 months of problems. Yeah.
Just going to ask on that line, you said it was, I guess, hard with the time frames being so long, but at the same time, were there a lot of people willing to help for free?
Oh, absolutely.
Or just giving them their time to make things happen?
Very good point, and it probably can't be overstated. There was officially about $400,000 worth of in-kind donated materials and services to the project. Realistically, it's more than that. So, for example, very early on, and this is the advantage of something being a community-led project like Scott and Rodney bringing it along. Scott went off and twisted Sylvester Clark, the engineering company in towns, or they in Wellington as well, and said you'll be doing all the design work, the structural engineering for free. They agreed to do that.
No. They said they'll invoice us for $1.
They did invoice $1, and then in the end, one of the then directors of the company also donated personally to the project, and he actually went and twisted several other arms. But why I bring that up is because their value attributed to the project at the moment is probably $100,000 shy of what it actually was. You know, given that it turned into a 7-year project. There's a bit of churn involved in the design and monitoring for that part of the project. They probably put an awful lot more than we actually valued. But a really good example, the one we always, Rodney and I often use when we're talking to people about the community support, is one of the early supporters on board involved the roof. So Scott ran off to an outfit in town called Lanceberry Roofing and said, we've got this fantastic project, you're going to be supporting it. We'd like you to do the roof for free. They loved it so much, they said, yep, that's fantastic, we'll run off to Metalcraft and we'll get them to provide the rolling of the steel for free for it. Metalcraft liked it so much that they ran off to New Zealand Steel out of town and said, why don't you guys provide the steel for free? So we ended up with the entire roof for free. That's the value of projects that have a lot of enthusiasm and passion behind them. That's not something a council can do. That's only the Rodneys and Scotts can get that done.
Just a question. So Rodney has had quite a bit to do with lions.
Rotary.
Rotary. And they built quite a nice basketball court in Highbury about a year ago. So did you learn a lot from that process, or going through that? Did you learn a lot from that you could apply to the building of this centre?
Well, basically, I learned from this to apply to the basketball court,
right.
Because this was an 8-year project, and the Stephen Adams basketball court was a 1-year project. So I basically started from July 2017, and as an idea from a couple of ladies wanting us to tidy up a playground, to August 2018, a fully graffiti painted Stephen Adams basketball court with Stephen Adams opening it. Massive gazebo for about 30 or 40 people, double barbecues, a couple of Poe carvings in there, and lit. That's all in 1 year. So what it taught me is that the reason why we got it is that Stephen Adams wanted that court in Auckland and Wellington, but after 5 years working through the bureaucracy, they gave up. They came and saw us in December, and we said, okay. And with our relationship already with council, we were able to then push that through really quickly, within weeks rather than years. But if you ever get a chance to go to Raleigh Street Reserve, just Google it, or Stephen Adams Basketball Court. There's a fantastic graffiti painted court there is painted by SQ1, who painted Jay-Z's court in Brooklyn. So you're getting a world-class facility in Palmerston North for free. And so again, it's understanding. You only ask people for money if they've got it, and if they don't have money, you ask them for support, and then you qualify how you get that support.
So relationships become really important, as much as it might seem that project management's about planning timeframes and working numbers and all that sort of thing. Actually, relationships with people will make a big difference between whether something is quick, smooth and easy, or long, painful and drawn out. Yes.
So I mentioned earlier on about the founders not being on the project team. So Scott and I were the founders, but we weren't on the trust board. And so the trust board, we selected the people on the trust board to basically guide and manage the project, but we weren't on it. So it allowed Scotty and myself to do things and say things that didn't represent the project, which at times were quite good. It meant that we could make promises that weren't quite fully formed, but we had an idea that's probably where we'll end up. Where a trust board are legally bound. If they say something, they really have to do it. So it's a little bit of, what you see here, it would not make sense if you tried to do it through a normal process. The number of volunteers and in-kind stuff that we got given to us, you couldn't put that in a project plan. And as a project plan, if someone says, I'll paint it for free, which we got painted for free, you can't tell them turn up on Monday at 9 o'clock because they're doing it for free.
Yeah.
They'll turn up when they they finish their last job because they've been paid for it. So there's all those types of push and pulls. It's a very, very unique project for a very unique facility.
Is there any particular questions or?
I guess it'd be nice to hear about the running of it now. So it's been thought out, it's been built, and now.
Well, do we want to do that as we maybe go through?
Yeah.
No, stay here. First, get some questions first.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about the school group.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions before we start wondering? In terms of what these guys have been doing, or in terms of how it relates to what you've been studying with Phil?
So what's as a student, if you had a project, what's the first thing that you would nail down before you started? What would be the first thing as a project that you would make sure that you signed off right at the start? What would it be? Obviously you must know because you wouldn't be here otherwise. If you were given a project, what would be the first thing that you would like to know and sign off on?
Come on, guys.
I don't know the answer.
Dead silence. No one?
It's alright, I don't know the answer either. It must be both.
It would just be funding, I guess, where the money's coming from, or is it post setting up a plan and then working from there?
So before you start a project, you need to know you can pay for it. Okay, we didn't. What's the next thing you should know? You should have a plan. We didn't. So this is not your typical project. And if you work for companies or organisations, sometimes they don't have those key elements. And it's how you mitigate and manage that expectations and that risk.
Rodney,
Yeah.
as you were going through, I mean, at the beginning of your project, we talk about things like your project charter, your statement of work. Those were your answers. And things like funding in your plan. But did you have those? I guess you and Scott had ideas, and then this board of trustees was kind of moving things along. But was there something signed off in terms of a statement of work or a project charter? Or was it kind of this ever-evolving thing because of all of the volunteers that you had, and, the idea changing the whole time?
We had probably some key core values. Okay, so it's one of the core values is it's for the birds. So that's some of the core values. So when you start doing your project, whatever you do, whatever decision you make, it's got to relate back. Is it going to help the birds? So really early on in the design concept, the designers from Seattle asked, what should it look like? And I said, it should look like the Pentagon with no windows. And Scott, being a builder, and he builds in concrete, and he said, and built of concrete. So when you look around, the Pentagon with no windows, because it should be a secure, safe. So in terms of scope of work, there was concepts for scope of work, then became fleshed out once we got a concept design. And the other thing is, I said I wanted a Paul Dibble bronze sculpture as being an iconic part of the design. And very early on, as the value of the project went from, Scott thought 140,000, I said 400,000, then it went over a few million, then a number of multiples of a million, to where we end up with 7 million. Plus, they said, how does this sculpture help the birds? And they took it out.
Sorry, with that overrun, does that matter in your mind?
No, there's not an overrun. Because we were doing a project to gift to the city. Now, because there is no budget for funding, the funding is flexible. The funding will meet whatever we're going to build. It's not like you have a budget to fit in. We'd like to build it for as least as possible, but do it properly. But there isn't a sort of fixed budget. In the next few months or weeks, there's going to be a 5.2 metre high Paul Dibble bronze sculpture sitting in the duck pond out there. So the next time you come through, about a month or so time, there's a massive Paul Dibble bronze. Because once we've got the $7 million, once we've built it, there's no excuse to say, why can't we have a Paul Dibble bronze? So we raised $250,000 and bought one. So it's going in there.
Cool. Right. Well, I may as well, obviously, so I'm the centre manager, and out of the three of us, I get the fluffy job, I guess you could say, because I get to actually be in here and work in here once it's finished. So that, again, has got its all sorts of unique and different issues with it, because there's a facility like this, there's lots of things that were done and planned for, and then we've got to work out exactly how that works and how that actually operates. Obviously, as these guys have said, there were a lot of people involved in this project, so there's a lot of perspectives of what was actually going to be happening once we were up and operational, so it's actually making sense of that and getting it going. Another thing is, so we obviously here we have our what drives us, which is the same as what you guys were talking about for the direction of the project. We have the vision and the mission, which informs our strategic direction, and that direction basically helps us make any decision that we need to make sure that it aligns with what the purpose of this facility is about. And as you guys would have heard, the purpose of this facility is to make sure that the birds, the animals, they manage to get rehabilitated and re-released back out into the wild. That's the core fundamental point of us being here, and everything else basically works around that. So we will do a little bit of a walkthrough because it's a little bit easier to talk about what we're doing as we're going around. But there are essentially four main components to this facility. And that's to give people a little bit of something to see as well when they're here if we don't have patients or anything exciting for them to see. So we have a free flight aviary, which is our walk-through aviary here. Going here, the purpose of this obviously is to be able to see something, but also there's some quite cool native species in here that a lot of people in their life would probably never get to see, depending on where they lived. So that's the hook. People can come down here and see this all the time. We've got a captive breed to release program here for two very endangered species. Hopefully you guys will know at least one of them. And so the council's been doing that for over 20 years now, and that's a super successful program. But now being part of this, it gives it a lot more of a background and a story for us to be able to educate people about it. Down the far end is our recovery end, so that's essentially a hospital ward, so that's basically what these guys were talking about. It came out of the hospital, the Wild Base Hospital as a need for a suitable recovery facility. So that's the crux of the place down there. And then we've got our education centre, the Pauka Education Centre. So that's basically the other part of this, is that we're trying to educate the next generation to the conservation messages and what they can actually do. So that's really cool, but I won't ruin that. We'll go in there anyway and have a bit of a look around. But so that's a really big component of the facility. You would have seen all the little kids going through before. That's our next generation of conservationists, even policy writers on what can be done. The vets. That's hopefully what we're inspiring out of those young groups. So anyway, we'll head on in and do a bit of a talking.